says while he was saying that, he looked up into the sky. And God opened the heavens. And Stephen saw Jesus standing on the right hand of the Father. That should have got somebody's attention. Because Hebrews says he sat down once and for all. But if he sat down, then why did Stephen see him standing? I'll tell you why. Because the Lord says, if you stand up for me, I'll stand up for you. You don't know who you're fooling with when you mess with a child of God. Man, I remember Joseph in the Old Testament. Remember, Joseph had some brothers who hated him. They were jealous of him. And every chance they got, they tried to do something to him because he was daddy's favorite. But you remember they caught him once without daddy, and they decided to kill him. But the oldest boy, Reuben, said, let's don't kill our brother. So they put him in a pit, and while they were trying to decide what to do with him, the Lord sent some Ishmaelites by. Somebody read this besides me. And those Ishmaelites took him into Egypt because his brother sold him to those Ishmaelites. He ends up going from Canaan. He gets to Egypt, and now he's bought by Potiphar. End up getting in trouble in Potiphar's house. End up going in prison. And then the Lord blessed him in prison. He goes from prison to Pharaoh's house. From Pharaoh's house to the prime minister of Egypt. And when his brothers who thought he was dead finally made it to Egypt, and he had a chance to get them back, you know what he told them? Y'all didn't know who I was. He said, y'all meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. In other words, thank you for lying on me. Had you not been jealous, you wouldn't have put me in the pit. Had you not put me in the pit, I wouldn't have been to Potiphar's house. Had I not gone to Potiphar, I wouldn't have went to prison. Had I not gone to prison, I wouldn't have been in fact. Thank you for lying on me. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. When people try to hold you by assaulting you, learn how to forgive because of their plain old ignorance. It says, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. And then had they really known who he was, they would have known some stuff about it. Had they known who he was, they would have known that the grave couldn't hold him. Had they known who he was, they would have known that no crucifixion could kill him. He said, no man takes my life. I'll lay my life down, and when I get ready, I'll pick it up again. Problem was they didn't know what they were doing. Well, let me say one more final thing. I'm going to let y'all out here. The first thing he says, Father, forgive him. He was showing us that he practiced what he preached. And then the second thing he says, Father, forgive them. They know not what to do, because he was saying, I want to pronounce their problem. And their problem is they are ignorant. And when Peter preached in Acts chapter 2, he said, you ignorantly crucified Jesus. Now, here's the third and final thing. Finally, he says, Father, forgive them. Not only is he practicing what he preached, not only is he pronouncing their problem, but thirdly, he is pardoning his persecutors. He says, I need to pardon my persecutors. Now he says, forgive them. Now the word forgive is the Greek word aphirme. The word aphirme means to dismiss. The word aphirme means to send away. Now watch this. He says, one problem we have is we don't know how to let stuff go. We don't dismiss it, we don't send it away, but we hold on to it. Yeah, matter of fact, I forgive you, but I'll never forget it. Now, listen. He says you got to learn how to dismiss it. He says forgive them, for their problem is they don't know what to do. You got to learn how to let it go. Because when you hold on to unforgiveness, it turns into something worse. It produces something worse. It gives birth to that which is even staggering, and that which can hinder and hamper your progress and your walk with God. When you hold forgiveness, you can't practice what you preach. You can't practice what you pray. You can't practice what you promote because you're holding grudges. Says you got to learn how to let it go. Dismiss it. Release it. When you forgive, you free two people. You and the other person. All right, amen. Because sometimes that other person walking around ain't got a care in the world. You can't sleep. You scheming. You're wondering how you're going to get them back. You think about them 24 hours. And I made up my mind, ain't letting nobody get no rent space in my head who ain't paying no rent. You're not going to get no space in it unless you're paying rent. You can't occupy no space in my head. Now, what is it? We need to learn how to let it go. I heard a story about a little boy who stayed in trouble. And his mother said to him as an incentive, she said, now listen, I want to take everybody to Disney World for the summer. I said, but if you cannot get in trouble at least 10 times during the whole summer, everybody go to Disney World. Well, now that was a stretch because this boy got in trouble 10 times in one day. But she said, if you can just do it. So she said, we're going to chart your progress. They put a blackboard up in the kitchen. And every time he messed up, she put a strike. Put a strike, put a strike. Now, here's what happened. He tried so hard. Matter of fact, he had gone the whole summer. Only got in trouble about 6 times. It was the day before the trip. He had 4 more strikes to go. Had already packed his bags. Because he knew, he said, man, I'm going to make this trip. But on the last day, he got about 12 strikes. On the last day. So no doubt that night with tears in his eyes, he unpacked his bags. Went on to bed because he knew his mama didn't play. Knew his mama said he wasn't going, he wasn't going. Went to bed that night, but that next morning, he woke up to the smell of bacon and eggs. And he heard some noise, commotion in the kitchen. And so you know how it is when you're messed up. So he wakes up and he looks, and the first thing he saw is that his bags had been repacked. But he didn't know what that meant, so he tiptoed out in the hall, peeped up the hall, and then he walks on up toward the kitchen. But you know, when he went to the kitchen, he wasn't looking at the bacon, he wasn't looking at the eggs, wasn't looking at the children, wasn't looking at mama, he was looking at the blackboard. And he looked at the blackboard, and to his surprise, the board had been erased because mama had forgiven him. You know what I learned from that? I learned that when it comes to forgiveness, forgiveness is not earned, it's given. You don't earn forgiveness, you give forgiveness. You got to learn how to give folk what God gave you. When it comes to forgiveness, stop making folk earn it. Because if we had to earn it, we never would have been saved. Matter of fact, even though you're saved, you still need some forgiveness. Because 1 John 1:9 is written to believers. And he said to believers, if you confess, he's faithful and just to forgive you and to cleanse you from all unrighteousness. That word forgive in 1 John 1:9, Reverend Hines, there's a word picture there in the Greek. It paints a portrait of them doing a transaction on a document, but the key is that ink pens, Dr. Johnson, had no acid in them. And because that ink pens had no acid, when they were done with the transaction, they would take a sponge and wipe that page clean, and they would start all over because it had a brand new start. 1 John 1:9 says, if you confess your sin, the Lord will wipe your slate clean. He'll clean your page and give you a brand new start. What you and I have to understand is that were it not for forgiveness, we'd all be on our way to hell. I know some of us try to make you think we ain't done no wrong, but sin is what you do, is what you think, and is what you leave undone. Omission, commission, as well as thought, and all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But because of the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, because of what Jesus did on Calvary, I'm forgiven tonight. And we've got to learn how to do for others what the Lord had done for us. I'm through when I tell you this. I told you this was going to be a hard word tonight. Hard word tonight. But let me say this to you. Adrian Rogers tells a story. He says that many, many years ago when he was a young man, he says, Pastor Hires, he went to Chicago, and in Chicago, on this certain street, there was a nightclub called the Gates of Hell. Now just let me take a sidebar for 1 minute and say I'm not a club member, but if I was a nightclub goer, I wouldn't be going to the left in the Gates of Hell. If I was a club member, I wouldn't be backing nothing up or shaking nothing up in the Gates of Hell. But you know what he says? He said, on the same street with the nightclub called the Gates of Hell is a church called Calvary. He says one night a tourist was in the city and he was looking for a good time. And somebody had told him about the club called the Gates of Hell. He saw a police officer and said, Officer, can you tell me how to get to the Gates of Hell? He said, son, all you got to do is walk right by Calvary and you'll run into the Gates of Hell. Can I tell you, I thank God tonight that I didn't walk by Calvary, but I stopped by Calvary. I didn't walk by the cross, but I stopped by the cross. And because I stopped by the cross, I'm glad I've been forgiven. Matter of fact, I wonder, is there anybody here tonight who know that there is a joy? Matter of fact, not in walking by Calvary, but in stopping by the cross. Because the truth of the matter is, that's where forgiveness is. Forgiveness is there on a hill called Calvary. Matter of fact, if you want to learn where forgiveness began, you got to make your way to a hill called Golgotha. And I thank God tonight that I didn't go by Calvary, but I stopped by the cross. That's why Big Mama said it was at the cross. At the cross where I first saw the lights. And the burdens of my heart, they rolled away. And it was there by faith that I received my sight. And right now, I'm happy all the day. And I wonder if there anybody in here tonight that thank God for the cross, because it was the cross of Jesus where my sins were forgiven. Matter of fact, there is a fountain filled with blood, and it's drawn from Emmanuel's vein. And those sinners plunge beneath the flow, they lose all their guilty stain. Is there anybody in here tonight that thank God for forgiveness? Thank God tonight for forgiveness, because not only have folk done me wrong, but I've done somebody wrong. Not only have folk messed over me, but all of us done messed over somebody. But thank God for forgiveness. I said thank God that he looked beyond my faults and supplied my needs. But can I tell you how he did it? I told you that he was assaulted on Calvary. I told you that he was insulted on Calvary. But I can't stop right there, because on Calvary he died. Do you know he died? But before I sit down, I got to straighten the story out. He died, but he didn't stay dead. I just wonder tonight, is there anybody in here that know the rest of the story? Right early Sunday morning, he rose with all power in his hand. And because he lived, I can face tomorrow. Because he lived, my fear is gone. I know he holds the future. And my life is worth living because he lives. Is there anybody here that know he's alive and well? Is there anybody here that know he's alive and he's well tonight? He walks with me and then he talks with me and he tells me that I am his own, and the joy that we share as we tarry there, none has ever known. Is there anybody here know you've been forgiven? I'm glad. I said I'm glad. Glad I've been forgiven. Is there anybody here can thank God for forgiveness?